be brief. I won't rehash a lot of what's already been said. I think it's important as we talk about, to observe, number one, that this is the 1-year anniversary of the murder, the lynching of the brother Muammar Gaddafi. But I think it's important to talk about where these wars actually come from, where they flow from. Imperialism, a lot of people talk about it, but it's important to understand, for us to understand, I think many of us here do, is that it's not a policy. It's not a policy of Barack Obama any more than it was a policy of George Bush or any of the other presidents that preceded them. It's an objective outgrowth of the capitalist system at a certain historical stage of development. That's what imperialism is. And we find, U.S. imperialism entered on the stage during its, first of all, capitalism itself, the foundation of which was the most naked, brutal aggression that the world has ever seen. It is not that it continues to be brutal now, it's just that the wars are more personal then. They're at the end of a knife versus somebody pressing a button and destroying a whole village and murdering people. So the wars are much more personal at that period in history, where people use smallpox blankets instead of weapons that can be lobbed with a weapon system that has poison within them. But U.S. imperialism at this particular stage of its development, because I want to not go over my 5 minutes that I have here, because you didn't come here to see me, is right now in this period of history there is a very profound crisis of the capitalist system. See, capitalism itself needs to expand or die. And that process is where one of the most profound fundamental crises of the capitalist system comes from. And right now we have a system that has overproduced the means of production. It is overcapacity. So the crises of overproduction, which leads to war, which leads to layoffs and the suffering of workers, not just in the imperialist world, but primarily, majority of the suffering is much greater in the oppressed world. So this crisis that we're at now is a crisis that is brought on by the fact that the system has expanded and outreached the globe. It can't expand anymore. They've staved it off through the collapse of the Soviet Union, the opening up of India, the opening up of China. They've been able to stave off the great expansion of the credit system, but all of that is gone. They're not going to find any more spheres of influence so they can super exploit the people. It's not that they're not going to try. You see, the countries that are under attack now are being attacked because they dared exercise, even if it's just a shred of independence from U.S. imperialism. And that is a no-no within this global world order. What the U.S. wants is everyone to acquiesce to their capitalist class, because they think that it will get them out of the crisis. But look what happened with Iraq and Afghanistan, those brutal wars that murdered hundreds of thousands of people and continue on to this day. It has not saved them or brought them out of the crisis of their system. The weapon systems that at a time, other periods in history, that they can, the Pentagon spends billions of dollars of paying for weapon systems, that cannot get them out of the crisis, especially when these weapon systems are not built or not labor intensive, but it's technology from which they get built. So we have to understand that. We have to see that as the crisis deepens, because it's not going away, that the U.S. will become more aggressive. You see, a wild animal is at its most dangerous when it is wounded, because it feels that it's back against the wall, it can't do anything else but fight to the death. And that is where U.S. imperialism, Western world imperialism, that's where they are today. I'm jumping around a little bit, and excuse me, because I'm trying to I don't even know where I am within these 5 minutes.
You don't. You're fine.
But, I remember, I was in Libya in 2007, and I remember when the events actually started there, it was the same propaganda that they're using now, that they've used against Syria. And there are unfortunately some people who would dare call themselves revolutionaries that think that it was a positive process that was developing in the world. And to those people, if any of them are here today, what say you now? What say you now when the entire country has been completely destroyed? And it had the most well-built infrastructure in all of Africa.
That's right.
And it has been completely destroyed. What say you now, since the massacres of black Libyans and the rounding up of thousands of people put in prisons who have not seen their families and may never see the light of day? So what say you now?
Right.
What positive has happened in Libya? And what positive could possibly happen in Syria? What is actually happening there? You have to look at no two rebellions are the same. You have to look at the social forces in motion. And the social forces in motion in Libya, just as they are in Syria, represent, those who are fighting in the interest of the bankers and financial capitalists in the Western world, in the U.S., which is predominant. They are fighting a war in their interest. And if they were to be successful, then the people of Syria will find themselves enslaved to the interests of U.S. imperialism. So if you are a revolutionary internationalist, you see, I used to always judge somebody who said they were a revolutionary in this country by how you looked at the national question in this country and whether you support self-determination. And on the international scene, you look at a person who calls himself revolutionary by how they see the primary contradiction that exists in the world today. And that is simply between the imperialist world and the oppressed world. And so if you were to ask me which side am I on, I support the Syrian government against the rats that are doing the bidding of U.S. imperialism. Just as I support the government of Libya, just as I support the government of Iran that is fighting against the people, fighting against the interests of U.S. imperialism being spread into their country and to take over that country. That is how we have to judge a revolutionary. There is no time for mistakes right now. It's very crucial. You see, the same banking interests that want to take over these countries are the same banks that will foreclose on people around the country. The same bankers that want to privatize the public education system. So it's within our interest to fight against them and to fight against U.S. imperialism and to support the governments around the world that are fighting, because their victory against U.S. imperialism strengthens our hand. They are our allies and brothers and sisters in the struggle. We must support them, and we must stand strong and stay down with U.S. imperialism. All power to the people. Thank you.